Last time we considered the idea that competent adult patients, that is to say, patients with decisional capacity, have a right either to accept or refuse treatment for whatever illness or injury they are suffering, and that this right to refuse applies even when the illness or injury is life-threatening and the proposed treatment promises to sustain their lives or extend their lives for a period of time. We said that this right is grounded in our principle of autonomy, this idea that people ought to be able to think, choose, value, and act for themselves without coercion or manipulation. Now, let me ask you to put yourself in the shoes of a physician who has offered to a patient some potentially life-sustaining treatment, and that patient refuses such treatment. I have said that generally it is believed that the patient has that right. But notice the conflict, the dilemma this creates for the healthcare professional. Aren't life-sustaining treatments in a patient's best interest, especially when a return to health is possible, or even when it sustains a life of some acceptable quality? From the healthcare professional's perspective, they have an obligation to benefit the patient. They have offered a treatment that provides that benefit, and the patient refuses. Autonomy requires the physician to respect that choice, but it means he or she may not do that thing which they believe benefits the patient. Don't healthcare professionals have a particularly strong obligation to provide care that benefits patients? That's the whole purpose and meaning of medicine and medical care. That's what often drew people into the profession, this desire to have the ability to help people. And now we're telling them, but you can't do it because the patient refuses. Some people would argue, and the third point here is that sometimes what is called medical paternalism is justified. That is to say, simply doing what's in a person's best interest, providing the care you as a physician believe they need, and overriding or disregarding their autonomy. Would such actions sometimes be justified because of the power, the impact, the importance of the principle of beneficence? Let me suggest, however, that this conflict between autonomy and beneficence may not be as great in practice as it appears to be in theory. And that is grounded in the recognition that, in fact, many life-sustaining treatments are burdensome or harmful to the patient. Obviously, we see that in Sarah Monopoly's situation. It's not just that this chemotherapy promises to extend her life, it also promises to make her very miserable, suffer a rash, be devastatingly fatigued, or even nauseated to the point of throwing up time and time again. Surely it's not self-evident that such a life-sustaining treatment is truly beneficial to the patient. Moreover, it is the patient who is best placed for making that judgment about whether the benefits of treatment outweigh its burdens. We have talked a lot about the fact that disease is one thing, but illness, the human experience of that disease, is quite different. Only the patient is living the disease, so to speak, and only the patient is in a position, in many situations, to truly evaluate whether a life-sustaining treatment is more beneficial to her than burdensome. And in terms of physician obligations, again, the AMA has pointed out that a physician or a healthcare professional is only obligated to offer sound medical treatment, only to offer to patients that treatment which in their professional judgment promises to be beneficial. But it does not in any way include an obligation on healthcare professionals' part to impose treatments on a patient who does not want that treatment. Having said all that, I want to insist as well that the potential conflict between autonomy and beneficence should not be ignored. It should be taken seriously. Surely we are right to do everything we can to preserve patient autonomy. But it seems to me we should also take quite seriously sound medical practice and professional integrity. Imagine a situation in which the recommendations of healthcare professionals were regularly and consistently ignored, such that healthcare providers simply were unable to provide the sort of care that their training and their experience has taught them is appropriate. That would surely be an appropriate moral concern if medical integrity was undermined in that way. Moreover, we should guard against a tendency to accept patient choices as competent or autonomous, especially when those choices seem to us unreasonable. Many have pointed out that it could well be that a patient is simply refusing a life-sustaining treatment as a way of committing suicide. And many would insist, look, healthcare professionals have no obligation to be agents of suicide or to be assist with suicide. Moreover, patients may well be significantly impaired by the suffering that accompanies their disease, but by a sense of hopelessness with which they have become overwhelmed, a fear of abandonment. Surely healthcare professionals have a responsibility to help patients face their suffering and their hopelessness and their despair, and not quickly acquiesce to choices that patients are making out of that sense of hopelessness and despair. And of course, we should also be aware of the possibility that patients are rejecting life-sustaining treatment under duress from their families. Duress that is real or simply misperceived. That is to say, often you'll hear older people say that they don't want to be a burden. And it might well be that a patient is rejecting a life-sustaining treatment out of a fear that they are a burden, or the cost of that treatment is a burden to their families. That worry may be valid, or it may be misperceived by the patient. We should take all these possibilities very seriously before we simply acquiesce to a patient's refusal of life-sustaining treatment.